This time we are coming to the sister book to Ephesians, that is Colossians. In this book, I do believe many of you have got to know already that Christ is fully unveiled to the uttermost. In the whole Bible, Christ has never been unveiled to such an extent. I would say no extent can exceed the extent that has been used by the Apostle Paul in unveiling Christ to us. In this short book, you have too many top expressions, highest terms to describe who is Christ. I don't need right now to give you all these top expressions tonight. We will see all these. But anyhow, I'd like to point out to you that you may be deeply impressed with this one thing. So, in this first message, I'd like to point out to you two things. Number one, the background of this book. And number two, the position of this book. I don't think we are going to see something not so crucial concerning these 2 points. Oh, the background and the position of this book, both are crucial. Why this book was written? Due to what? Well, if you would spend much time in chapter 2, you could see in chapter 2 are 3 verses. Verse 8, verse 16, and verse 18. All these 3 verses are warning verses. May we all reread these 3 verses again? Verse 8, verse 8. Let's all read together. You can realize these 3 verses are all verses of warning. Verse 8. Be aware that no one carries you off as spoil through his philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the elements of the world, and not according to Christ. Listen, have you noticed that in this one verse, how many strategic, negative things are mentioned? I like to point out to you as spoil. We could all be a spoil to something. Then it says through philosophy. Philosophy, an empty deceit, according to tradition. Philosophy, deceit, tradition of man, according to the elements of the world. Here you have 4 negative things that can carry you off as a captive, as a prey, P-R-E-Y, as a spoil. What are these 4 negative things? Number 1, philosophy. Number 2, deceit, empty deceit. Number 3, the tradition of man. Number 4, the elements of the world. You have philosophy. Let me check with you. Is philosophy good or bad? You know, according to human culture, philosophy is a top invention in human culture. This is the best in the eyes of the fallen people. Philosophy. and then deceit, and then tradition, and then elements. Elements means what? Means elementary principles of certain kind of teachings. Elements here doesn't mean substances. Elements here means elementary principles of some kind of teachings. So here you have these four things. I like to impress all of you with these four things: philosophy, deceit, tradition, and elements. And these four things could carry us, the believers of Christ, off as a prey, as a spoil. So Paul says, beware of this. Beware of this. Beware of these four things. Among them, there was a mixture. And that mixture was with the Jews. You all know that the Jews, they did have their kind of concept, their kind of a religious concept. So, by that time, I tell you, either the Jewish culture or the Greek culture, all of them have saturated the church, and all of them have invaded the church, and the church just like a little house under a kind of tide, T-I-D. The tide comes, it's hard for the little house to stand there without being touched. Right? The tide has saturated the house, and the tide has invaded the house. What is the house? And that little house was the church. And that little house should be filled with Christ. And that house should be the house of Christ. And that house should be full of Christ, even composed, constituted with Christ. But now, I tell you, the elements that constitute that house were, to some extent, instituted, replaced. The constitution, the constituents of that house should be only Christ. That is Christ's house. That is Christ's body. The contents, the constitution, even the constituents of that house should be just Christ. But now, some so-called good things of human culture came into that house, to saturate that house and to invade that house. And what were these good things in human culture? I tell you, briefly speaking, just religion and philosophy. And these invaded the church. And this also not only invaded, but also saturated. You all have to see the subtlety of the enemy. These are, humanly speaking, in human culture, are all good things. Nothing bad. Am I right? Nothing bad. But you have to realize the subtlety of the enemy is to use all the top things of human culture to do one thing. You know, to do what? To replace Christ. Right. To replace Christ. Christ was replaced. No need to say in this 20th century, even earlier, that early, in the first century, while the Apostle Paul was still on this earth, such a kind of sub-institution was there already. Christ was substituted. The enemy of God just subtly used we stop good things of human culture to substitute Christ, to replace Christ. You may think, well, praise the Lord, we are not in the first century, we are in the 20th century, and here we have Christ, we don't have any substitution. Be careful. Be careful to say this. You have to realize in today's Christianity, nearly Christ is altogether replaced with some other things. Christ is substituted with all those things. You be careful. You just be careful. The person of Christ has been and still is substituted with so many things.